Come back to the breath if you've drifted away. It's normal to drift away, especially at the beginning. Return to the breath. If that's too difficult, return to the count and do a count +1 until you feel more comfortable. That's a nice way to begin the morning. One thing to point out that you'll notice, especially the first few times you meditate with a group of people, let's say you're going to a sangha and you're one of 10 people in the room. Well, depending on the concomitant noise all around the place, in this case, we got to hear a finch of some kind. I'll try and find out what that is, but there was a finch singing during the meditation, and it's easy to be lost. In fact, even the air conditioning in my home would probably keep me from hearing it. And so it's nice when your hearing starts to bring any evidence it can to you that it's still working. And when it's silent, we tend to know that our hearing gets better. It's not if one sense is shut down, the others are heightened. I'm not sure how true that has ever been, but in this particular, other than trained skills, but in this case, what's lovely about it is that, and microphones are very bad about this too, you will stop noticing ambient noises because they don't register to you until you sit down to meditate. And then after a few minutes, suddenly, oh, I'm hearing this, I'm hearing this, I'm hearing this. And sometimes just to make sure that you feel good about yourself, your stomach starts to growl. Or this is a very common phenomenon, you realize that swallowing makes a lot of noise, especially if you're sitting like arm's length from somebody in front of you. They've got to hear your belly gurgling, and a lot of meditation retreats have wonderful vegetarian and vegan meals, but a lot of people aren't used to that, and so their bellies will start to hop around on them. And it was always thus. It's just that when you're sitting and paying attention, suddenly those noises become alarming. Oh gosh, they're hearing my stomach, dude. In my case, when my stomach started doing not any acrobatics, there was no discomfort. It was just the general sound that people make when they're digesting. And we forget that that's normal because we cover up with, for in a restaurant, that's far too much noise for us to hear. If you can hear it over a restaurant crowd noise, then yeah, maybe you might want to take a Tums or something. But if you're alone and meditating or in a sangha among a group of maybe 15 or 20 or more, you suddenly think everybody's hearing me swallow, everybody's hearing my belly go off. And sometimes that's the case. But when you're meditating for a while, oh, good morning. You'll know that this is if you meditate for long, you know that this happens to everybody. There's no judgment in it. It just happens. And so accepting the things that are going to happen to you when you're in a meditative state can help keep you from thinking you're doing it wrong, if that makes any sense. Knowing that, yes, I'll suddenly get self-conscious about how much my swallowing sounds. I don't know if you could hear that, but if I'm in the middle of meditating, holy cow, I'm certain that everybody can hear it. And that's simply not the case. And then just a little bit of air conditioning can keep people from hearing it. Open air, generally the sounds of birds and breezes can keep anyone else from hearing it. But when you're in the meditation sangha, especially if it's one of those lovely rooms that you walk into that feels far more important than you feel, and thinking, oh gosh, holy things happen here. That's done by choice. It's a deliberate choice that somebody makes when they're trying to build an environment that allows you to meditate. In this case, it's not really encouraging meditation so much as it's encouraging respect or awe, or with some folks in the wiki wushu type of thing, makes them feel like they're connected to a centuries-old practice. None of that's necessarily untrue, but in that formal of an environment, wow, you get concerned that you've made a lot of noise, and the truth is you really haven't. And add on to that, one quick little thing I'll expand on in another session, but you also tend to open your eyes right at the moment other people have their eyes closed. And so you may be having a bad sit, and what you're really doing is sitting among 10 people doing this every once in a while just to see, hey, is everybody else still meditating? And especially in beginning sanghas, or if you've got somebody who's on their very first 10-day retreat, wow, is that after about 3 days, people start to either really wig out or really smooth out. And that depends almost entirely on the instruction they receive. Just throwing around, I can't do a 10-day session. I think you probably can if it was introduced to you the right way, and if you knew what to expect, so you could say, this is normal. Because that social pressure we have, that social reinforcement, I'm doing what others are doing. That's the peaking of the eyes, that's the inhibiting your own swallow reflex. All those things are exceptionally normal when you're starting a meditative practice. So just the fact that you've peaked and other people have had their eyes closed doesn't mean that their eyes didn't open the very second you peaked. After, a couple of decades, you start to really be uninterested in the competitive meditation aspect of it. But until then, one day it just drops. You just stop being concerned about it. But until then, it's fun to actually say, okay, I'm a beginner. I feel like I'm standing out. Everyone here is more enlightened than I am. Well, who knows if that's true? Maybe it's the opposite. But that's the feeling, that's the impulse. And that's why when our ears suddenly start to pick up more and more in a quiet room as we meditate, if we're not careful, we'll actually turn that into a sign that we're the ones who aren't paying attention. And that's just not true. So you can even sit in a chair in your bedroom and meditate. I'm actually no pants meditation this morning, but it's a close-up shot, so we're not worried about that. But the point is, you can sit, and my hips are basically just a little bit above my knees, and that tends to be the only real requirement for some sitting positions, and that's to ensure your quality over time, and to make sure like your feet don't fall asleep and other such things. But it was a nice morning meditation. I'll look up who that finch is and add it to the comments. But thank you for joining me.